It's now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C Studios in Lake George, New York. Freezing cold, Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C Show. Good morning, good day, good evening. Whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening, I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show, she's being brought to you in part by my book. Tom Molyneux from Bondage, the Baddest Man on the Planet is available right now where all good books are sold. And you can get a copy of this book, right now, while you're watching or listening to this very show. Just visit Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or drop me an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing. That's TalkinBoxing.com. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by the website BillyCBoxing.com, where you can find all the latest and greatest boxing news, plus information on this show. And if you scroll around the site, you'll find some events that are taking place, like CES, Jimmy Birchfield's Classic Entertainment Sports. I got a couple of shows coming up, February 15th, February 22nd. Just click the banner on the right-hand side, and you get all the information on where you can get tickets and see those. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by Blackett Shopping Network. Check out the website, BillyCBoxing.com. Click on the Blackett banner. You can't miss it. And finally, today's show is being brought to us in part by the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame. I'm proud and honored to have been part of the 2025 Hall of Fame class. And I'd love to have you guys come and join me for what promises to be a great weekend event in Florida. June 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Just visit the site, BillyCBoxing.com. Click on the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame banner and get all the information. Coming up later on the show, Alex is going to join us. We're going to be talking about the fight this weekend, David Benavidez and David Morrell. I will be breaking it down, giving you my predictions. We got some boxing news to talk about, some fight results, and as requested by you, we have today's topic, a special topic is going to be, we're going to take a look at behind the scenes of being a professional boxing manager and promoter. And joining us to talk about that will be the man, the myth, the legend himself, Carl King. So Alex and Carl will be joining us in a little bit. I want to give a shout out to the early people that are in the chat room, my man Jesus and Juggernaut. I haven't seen him in a bit, so he's in there. If you're watching or listening live, come on over to the chat room in YouTube and get your comments, thoughts, put them down, and I'll read them and talk about them. But before we get going today, a sad note in the sport of professional boxing. We lost a guy that is a 2012 Boxing Hall of Famer, was regarded as one of the best and feisty boxing writers in the last several decades, probably close to 4. Michael Katz passed away this past Monday at 85 years old. Our thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to the friends and family of Michael Katz. He was definitely an instrumental player with writing articles that were second to none. So Michael Katz passes away at 85 on Monday. Some fights that took place this past weekend, and one that I watched, and I try to watch them all, but the fight that took place in Las Vegas, Diego Pacheco took on Steve Nelson. Now, last week I predicted that Pacheco was going to win the fight, and he did. But I tell you the truth, Nelson gave him all he could handle. And I think if Nelson fought the way he did in the last couple of rounds, maybe the results would have been a little different. But what I did see, in case you missed it, it was a unanimous decision. Pacheco improves to 23-0 with 18 knockouts, and Nelson loses for the first time in his career. He drops to 20 wins, 1 loss, with 16 of his wins coming by knockout. And I'll tell you what I saw. I saw a guy with in Steve Nelson that was in great shape. I thought that the age was going to play more of a factor than it appeared to have, because he didn't run out of gas. But Pacheco, he showed me something. He showed me some poise. He clearly, I think I'll get to that in a second. He showed some poise. He has some pop. He's very accurate with his punches. And when I get into talking about the fight this weekend, Benavidez against Morrell, I'm going to circle back to Pacheco because Pacheco's team is the same as David Benavidez. Benavidez's father trains Pacheco. And I liked what I saw in Pacheco. He's evolving and becoming a good fighter. He's got a good jab. He's smart. He's accurate with his punches. He's 23 years old. And he did get hit towards the end. He did get hit with some power shots by Nelson. He seemed to take them well. I believe that it was good timing that the power punches from Nelson were coming at the end of the fight, because if he would have connected with some of those shots early on, maybe there would have been a little more power behind him. We'll get my man Alex Pierpaoli with us right now, and we'll surprise, and we'll get his thoughts on the Pacheco Nelson fight. What did you think? I thought Pacheco looked pretty good.
I have not gotten a chance to see that fight yet. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, well, when you do, hopefully you'll think the same as me. I enjoyed the fight. There was another fight that was on that wasn't that I enjoy. I love watching the stuff in the afternoon. Dalton Smith improved to 17-0 with 13 knockouts when he destroyed Vlad Uzia in the very first round. I mean, there was a mismatch. Uzia drops to 19-3. But did you get a chance to see the Inoue fight?
Oh yes, that I did. That's must see TV.
What did you think? Because my initial thought, I watched the fight and Inoue looked like the monster he is, but he was in there with a late sub, Alex, and it didn't seem like the sub was even though he was talking a lot of smack, it didn't seem like he was on the same level as his original opponent.
No, he wasn't, but I think he certainly tried very hard, and I think he landed some big shots, and I think that was in a way has created this mystique about himself that if you are able to hit him, it almost, because I was like, whoa. When he got nailed a few times, but I think he knew what he was up against, and he's the kind of guy who likes to mix it up. So because he didn't seem phased at all, and he didn't seem like they were definitely hard shots right to his headpiece, but he's one of those kind of guys that I think he likes when you engage him. And like it was a round later that he took the guy out. So I do think that and it was, even though it was like a barrage of shots, it seemed like it was the body shot that kept him down, because he hit him with a body shot and nailed him in the head, but as he was trying to get up, it looked like it was the body that was really bothering him.
Well, that always is the case with a devastating body shot. I mean, your whole body, shuts down. And we've all seen it. But Alex, what's your thoughts? I mean, they're doing the same thing to Inoue that they did to Lomachenko and other, pound for pound top fighters, where they want him to move up. Oh, he wants to move. I saw something somewhere where they're pushing for a potential Tank Davis fight against Inoue. I mean, in my opinion, these guys can only go up so much. I mean, Terrence Crawford obviously is breaking the mold. He's seeking, immortality by moving up to face Canelo. But that's a unique situation. I don't know how much more we should expect the monster to move up. What's your thoughts on the way? I don't know if it's the public or if it's promoters or whatever that constantly push these guys to keep moving up.
I think it's money, and I think you're right. I mean, it is one of those things where he's accomplished so much, and you wonder if part of making him move up is like, well, we want to see somebody beat him.
Right, and that's what I kind of think. Like they keep making these guys move up until they lose. I mean, I know the money is there, but physically, you can only move up so much.
True. And I think, in this instance, Kim was, out of his league. So in a way did what, was expected. I think that he, however, I do think that the bigger he gets, he is easier to hit. And I think, at some point we're going to see, I don't know, we might see him in a fight. I don't know. I think the Tank Davis fight would be interesting, but yeah, I think it's too big. I mean,
too big.
That was 122. Davis, it would be 135. So at least.
Davis isn't even fighting at 135.
Yeah, so I think I think in order to make a fight like that, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like, he might come back down, but
yeah, but then what? Then you're going to be hearing about rehydration clauses and all those other little asterisks, I just think you get to a point where enough is enough. I mean, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with fighters dominating their division, cleaning it out, and hanging around at the top for as long as they can. I mean, there are exceptions if these fighters, want to chase greatness. They keep challenging themselves, and I've said that many times. I respect fighters that challenge themselves, but I don't like when everybody else pushes them to it,
Yeah, and I think, I think that Inoue is the kind of guy that, he wants to challenge himself. At least that's one of the things that's been so impressive with him, is that he keeps, like maybe, the bar is set here, he leaps over it. The bar is set here, he leaps over it. So I do think that, at some point he might not be able to make that jump, but and I do think that lightweight would be too big. There's still, good fights for him. Even if he stays where he's at, so I don't know. And he is getting older, but to me, he's pound for pound the best in the sport. Just because nobody does it like him. I mean, he lays waste to guys. As much as, Usyk and Crawford are definitely, right there too. I'm an Inoue guy. I think Inoue is number one. But I do think that the Davis fight, even though you can't help but think, wow, that would be intriguing, I think it is too much.
Well, first of all, I'll comment to LDL, who's in the chat room. It's not us saying Tank against Monster. I saw it being discussed on social media. But in any event, Bob Arum promises that his next fight will be in the U.S. So we'll wait and see there.
That would be awesome, because I think he did fight here once, but it was during the Rona. So I think that, there was like nobody there. So it would be really cool for him to fight over here now.
Well, let's talk about the fight this weekend. But first, let's get my main man on. Carl King joins us right now. What's up, Carl?
Good, Billy. How are you, man? Alex, how are you?
Hey,
I'm
Carl.
doing good.
Yeah.
I know. Well, maybe not where you are, but I know Florida got hit with some cold weather, but it just hasn't left here. So if you guys need any more, if you need to cool down a little more, I'll be glad to send it to you, man. I mean, you know. But Carl's joining us today. We're going to talk about some behind the scenes look at what it takes and some things. Maybe Carl will share some stories about being a professional boxing manager. We'll talk about that in a second. But we got a big fight coming up this weekend, and I'll tell you the truth, fellas. I was on the edge with this fight, and I really didn't have a prediction till one of our longtime listeners kept pushing me for it, truthfully, because he's gonna bet his son on the fight. But I made my decision. I already told him, but let's break down this fight. David Benavidez going up against David Morrell. David Morrell is a Cuban fighter, Cuban style. One thing I will say about Morrell is that usually when you're talking about Cuban fighters, you're talking about fighters that had a couple of hundred amateur fights. He's only had 53. He was 48-5. But he's a young guy, 11 wins, no losses, 9 of his wins coming by knockout. He's 27 years old, southpaw, 6'1". He's ranked number 4 by the computer, and he's distinguished in the WBA as the regular, which kills me. I can't believe they even print that, but the regular world light heavyweight champion. In my opinion, guys, his last 3 fights were against good opposition. In April of 23, he destroyed in the first round Yamaguchi Falco. In December of 2023, second round stoppage over Sina Agbeko. And last year in August, he won a 12-round decision over Rad Kaladizik, I think is how you pronounce his name. But if I didn't destroy somebody's name, I wouldn't feel comfortable. And he goes up against David Benavidez. No real amateur career. Similar in height. Benavidez has an inch on him at 6'2". He's an orthodox fighter. But this is an interesting stat, especially when you look at the fact that Morrell has got that Cuban style. Morrell has a 4-inch reach advantage over Benavidez, which kind of surprised me. He's ranked number 3 in the world. He too holds one of those esteemed belts as the WBC interim light heavyweight champion. His last fights were all against good opposition. In March of 23, he won a 12-round decision over Khalid Plant. In November of 23, he forced Demetrius Andre's corner to stop the fight in the 6th round. In June of 24, he won a 12-round decision over Alexander Vodzik. And he also has some knockout wins over Anthony Durrell, J. Leon Love, and David Lemieux. I like the fight. I'll start off with you, Alex. What's your thoughts on the fight, and what's your prediction?
I do like it as well. I think in some ways it'll be, a good test for Benavidez, even though as a pro, Morrell doesn't look as experienced. I think in terms of skill, he is one of the better guys that Benavidez has faced. And I think part of it is because I think our friend Demetrius Andrade was definitely a skilled guy, but he was too small. I think that Morrell is more his size. And I think, like you mentioned, I think he's a little longer. So I think that he can use that to put some space between himself and Benavidez, and I think that could be effective. Plus, Morrell's a southpaw, so I think those 2 elements, Benavidez is going to have to walk him down and use his bulk and his strength. I do like Benavidez in this fight, so I'm taking Benavidez on maybe a harder than expected unanimous decision.
What do you think, Carl?
Well, you know what? I think Benavidez is a tough out for anybody. I don't know much about Morrell, but what I'm hearing is rangy, southpaw. and and has that Cuban. What am I trying to say? That the nature of Cuban fighters, they're awful tough. They come from a breed of fighters that are really, really polished when they get, if they get to be a professional fighter, they're fairly polished. So those kind of elements makes me think that we got a more interesting fight than what it may seem on paper. But Benavidez, here's a guy that at one time in his life was a real heavyweight. He lost a lot of weight to get down to the 75 pounds, and he's been impressive. He's had his challenges in and out of the ring, and I just think that Benavidez, to me, might be the class of the 175-pound category. So we'll have to see how David Morrell, fares against him, because it sounds like it's going to be an interesting fight, a difficult fight. But for me, it's hard to go against Benavidez.
I tell you, my official prediction, and when everybody talks about the Cuban fighters, right? I mean, what they mean by that is, they're very they're boxers. They can move, they can box. They generally have extensive amateur careers against high level amateurs. It's not just, I no disrespect to some states or whatever, but to win the Golden Gloves in New York City or Chicago compared to winning the Golden Gloves in, no offense, but North Carolina or something like that, it's a big difference. So that's when people talk about Cuban fighters. They're fighting quality opposition generally, okay? But the transition to professional, what I've seen over the years, and this is includes some of my favorite fighters, some of my favorite fighters, Cuban fighters. The guys that come to mind, like Yuriorkis Gamboa, for example. Some of the things that they demonstrate as pros, is their chins could be suspect because they're trained so much with the sweet science, so to speak. And I've seen them cave into hard body shots. I think the power element is in David Benavidez's favor. And like Alex, I agree that Benavidez is, at least his resume as a pro is much more impressive than Morrell's. So yeah, like you guys, I'm going with Benavidez. I think it is going to be a tough fight, and I do agree with you, Carl, that Benavidez could very well be the big guy of the light heavyweight division after Bivol and Artur Beterbiev decide to hang him up, because obviously those two guys are where it's at right now. As a matter of fact, Beterbiev has all those titles. That's why Morrell is just a regular title holder and Benavidez is an interim title holder. But yeah, so I guess that's not good for us all picking Benavidez. So if you have money on the fight, I go with Morrell since we all picked Benavidez. Well, usually what happens, right? I mean,
I think to Carl's point about the size, I think there is discussion about should Benavidez win, either if he doesn't get the winner of Beterbiev, the Beterbiev Bivol rematch, he might move up to cruiserweight and fight Zurdo Ramirez. So he's a big, strong guy.
But you would think he has to. You would think he has to get that because either guy, they both have basically they're the next fighters in line for the WBA and the WBC respectively. They both hold those we're next title belts, you know what I mean? So that's how and this is a good segue right now, because now we want to talk about the ins and outs of boxing management, and we'll sprinkle in some promotion. But Carl, here you are. Okay, let's put ourselves in this position. Our fighter is one of these guys. Let's say they have the interim belt, or the regular belt, which is just a different word for interim, and they're guaranteed a shot from those sanctioning bodies to be the next guy. Okay, now this is how they break up the unified titles, by having these mandatories. So now you're the manager. What goes on behind the scenes? I mean, how do you maneuver your fighter? Is it something that you're using as a bargaining chip to get that title shot? Are you interested in unification? I mean, put your manager hat on. What are
Well,
we looking at?
well, look, for me, you know, when you get to that mandatory position, as a contender, not as the world champion, but as the contender in the mandatory position, that excuse me, that's one of the more difficult time spans that you're going to have as a manager and a fighter, because more often than not, you're in a position that you can no longer be active or busy, and dealing with, or depending on your past excuse me, your past patterns of fights. If you've been an active fighter and you've been fighting every, let's say, 90 days, every 120 days or so, and you get to that mandatory position, it can be difficult, because now you may have to wait an entire year to actually get that fight, or to even be in a position to get the fight, and the fight may actually take place beyond that year span. So that's when, you know, the decision comes in as to you weighing your options, whether you want to go after the unification fight. For me, that's always been a big thing. But it comes, being a unified champion also comes with far more responsibility. You have multiple mandatories. You can't, you know, at some point in time, it's difficult to satisfy all of these organizations. So at some time, and more likely than not, you get stripped of one of those titles, or be forced to have to give that up in pursuit of the bigger payday. But I think management, you know, really gets down to personal relationships with the athlete. A manager simply has to know. He has to know the intricate thinking of the athlete, of the fighter himself, what his goals and aspirations are. What is he trying to achieve in life? Is it to just amass an abundance, you know, of money? Is it to reach a certain plateau? Depends on what his ultimate goal is beyond the ring. What is he actually trying to achieve? Is how you formulate your decision on whether you want to go, you know, go for the unification. And I think that's always wise, because, you know, guys are they're competitors, I mean, to their bitter core. So they want to be able, guys on that level want to be able to put their skills up against the absolute best, so they can say that they are the world champion, not a world champion. So I think it's always best to prepare the fighter for the waiting period to get to the bigger fish. But you need to get there, and you need to put your talents to the test against the very best.
You know, Alex, Carl makes some great points, because we've said this all the time. It's not the fighters that don't want to fight the next guy. You know, I can't stand social media nowadays. You hear all the smack talking, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, the sanctioning bodies are driving the bus, and I'm sure Carl will agree with that. And you know, they don't even rank. You know, if a fighter is ready to fight for another belt, or he's in line to fight for a belt, next thing you know, he's dropped from all the other sanctioning bodies rankings. You know, and last week I talked about Turkey Al-Rashid and what he could do to help the sport. And one of the things I said, and I got some response on that, was, and I know it's not going to happen, but if you went back to the ring ratings and recognized the ring title, which is the linear championships, as the world title holder, things could be a lot easier, because, you know, back in the day, you'd climb that ladder, you get ranked at number 10, you're a damn good fighter. So you fight the guy at number 9, and then the winner of that fights the next one, and then all of a sudden the number 1 guy fights the world title holder. Could that work? I mean, how would that be sprinkled in? Is it the sanctioning bodies that are driving this bus?
I think that's sort of the age-old question and dilemma that boxing has is, everybody wants to be a world champion. Well, there's only one world, and the sanctioning bodies all act as if they're the one. Each sanctioning body says, well, our top 10 or our top dozen, they're the best in the world. But as you just pointed out, if you're ranked in one, a lot of times the other ones won't rank you because you're ranked in the other one. So it's like the fact that they compete with each other sort of already waters down the idea that the top 12 in any division is actually the best in the world. There's actually a top 36 if you think of it that way. Or if you consider, 4 divisions, it's a top 48, which that's a little ridiculous.
It is.
So that idea that the Ring Magazine or the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board, if you used their rankings, that would definitely add a lot more credibility to the sport. But I think that the problem would be they wouldn't agree on that. I think, as Carl pointed out, I think that, you get to a point where it's sort of, what do you want to get out of the sport? If you want to fight the best, everybody sort of knows who the best is. And some of these fights, sure, it might be for a sanctioning body title, or it might be the top guy in sanctioning body A in their division. But people know, well, there should be an asterisk next to that. Now, I think we're in a time now where, depending on what streaming service you're watching, they're not going to tell you the truth. They're going to act as if that is the most important fight that could be made for that fighter, which that's unfortunate. And that's where, a guy like a Larry Merchant, I used to love, because he was the kind of guy that he didn't care what the other division said. He would shoot straight from the hip, and you would know that, at least according to Larry, this is a good fight or isn't a good fight. Of course, people could disagree, because that's the other part about it, is it's a subjective sport. But I think what I find fascinating as to what Carl said is that I never realized that was something that goes into the the managing of a fighter, is that a fighter might come to the manager and say, hey, look, my goal is, when I'm done with boxing, I want to own and manage a car dealership. So I want to get out of this sport enough capital so that when I'm done, I can go do that. And I think that's fascinating to me, because, so many of these fighters, it does look like there is no end game plan, that there's more just this next fight and then getting better and better and better. So I find that very interesting.
Carl, that's part of the manager's job, right? To bring up those issues to a fighter, to make them start to think about life, after boxing. But my other question is, you're faced you're faced with a fighter who could potentially fight for a title. Is it the money? I mean, I know the answer to the question. It's a stupid question, but of course the titles bring more money, but the value of those titles can't be the same as they used to be. I mean, you've been involved in the sport a long time, and you've seen the peaks and valleys. I mean, am I crazy, or is the value of a title today at the lowest point to date?
Personally, I think that if it's not, it's damn close.
Right.
Years ago, and I'm going back decades ago, when you go back to the 80s, when you had you had really 2 leading organizations at that time, in the early part of the 80s, which was the BC and the BA. The IBF came along after Robert Lee or Bobby Lee Sr. Lost the election in 1982 to Gilberto Mendoza. That's brought on the IBF, and the WBO came years later. But what happens, when you get to those positions, like even as a world champion, and you have a mandatory fight, there has been instances in which the number one contender is not a marquee name. So it's not a marquee fight. So the world champion now is stuck with having to fight a guy where he can't probably get the amount of money that he's normally accustomed to getting, because that number one contender is a relative unknown. And, and he may be not even ranked, as Alex said earlier, in the other governing organizations. So you're stuck. You're put in a position to have to make a decision. How valuable is that particular organization's belt to you and your fighter compared to the match that you're trying to make or the type of money that you're trying to make? So some guys make decisions based on money, and others on for other various reasons. I was always of the ilk that you have to fight first for prestige, and then you fight for money. That you have to become well known, and if once you achieve a certain level of prestige in the boxing ring, then you can command the amount of money that you're looking for. It doesn't just happen because you win a belt that all of a sudden you go from making $100,000 to $50 million. It doesn't work like that. You have to be able to put meat in the seat, and in this sport you got to be loved or hated, to do that. When you look at Ali, who was, probably hated in the beginning of his career and loved at the end.
Yep.
Mike Tyson, was loved, for his knockout abilities, and then, later in life, he was not as popular for all of the things that occurred in his life. But then you got a Larry Holmes that never was, he wasn't completely loved, and he wasn't totally hated. So he kind of fell in the middle. And here's a guy that fought the majority of his championship career in a 3,000 seat tennis pavilion at Caesar's Palace, until he got the fights with Ali, until he got a fight with Jerry Cooney, that he can be in an outdoor 25,000 seat venue. So yeah, you have to, for a young fighter coming up, my recommendation would be, we're going to fight for prestige. And what that means is that your personality, whatever it may happen to be, we have to seize on every little opportunity for you to be well known. And what's, what we have today that we did not have in the 80s was this, and the 90s as well, with social media. You didn't have the internet then. So a lot of things are different because of this instant gratification world we're living in, and guys can communicate better. And a lot of these fights are made because of social media interaction between two athletes, and management is sitting back, not even involved in this. And the fighter says, I want to fight this guy. Well, damn, I can't believe I got this cough, excuse me. But a lot of times a guy wants to fight somebody that management trainers may feel that you're not quite ready for that. You might be a fight or two away from that, but you can't discourage a fighter from thinking that he is the absolute best in the world. So you have to balance that, walk that plank, so to speak, and try to balance it out and see if you can reason with the guy without, ticking him off or making him feel like you don't believe in him. So it's a balancing act a lot of times when social media is involved. So, so I think today the belts are diluted quite a bit because, guys are picking fights and picking who they're not going to fight via social media, as opposed to, a management think tank / with a promoter think tank that you can come up with the best possible route to get to your ultimate goal.
Listen, one of the things that I want to comment on that is, it's almost like promoters don't promote anymore, managers don't manage anymore. They got the title, they wear the hat, so to speak. But you touched on something that I feel is very important. You said if you're with a sanctioning body, whatever one it is, and they say, "Okay, Mr. Fighter, your mandatory is so and so," and you're like, "So and so." All of a sudden, he appeared. He's number 10. He wasn't. You didn't never heard of him before. Now all of a sudden, he's number 10. He's your mandatory. Now the promoter is supposed to try to make that fight sound appealing to the fan base, so that he can afford to put the fight on and pay the fighters, right? So that becomes a whole nother avenue from a promotional standpoint. And then when you sprinkle in social media, where promoters, at least in my opinion, seem to be taking a back seat now, as well as management, and the fighters are calling each other out. Alex and I talk about it all the time. They say this, they say that. I'm going to do this. When I get you, I'm going to do that. Then they don't do any of that stuff. And half the time the fights don't even happen. I mean, Alex, you've seen that a million times.
Well, I think there's definitely times where, there's fights that we wanted to see and then we don't get to see. But I do think that that's one of the things that is, I think that's probably in a boxing standpoint, that's one of the good things about social media is that it can create beefs. So then once there's a beef and there's some, and if, there's almost like when both fighters have a lot of followers, you have a built-in audience. Because
but a lot of those beefs aren't real, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, but we know that doesn't matter, because if there's enough audience, then these guys are professional fighters. They'll fight. Even if they don't really hate each other, like they're acting like they might be on Instagram. That doesn't mean, when it comes right down to it, if they're competitive fighters, they'll fight once the bell rings. So I do think that is one of the things that social media can work for our sport. But I do think that that's usually not the way you're going to get to see the best matchups. You might see some interesting matchups, especially on the regional level. But in order to see who's the best in that division, that's not the way you're going to find that out.
Hey, Carl, do you think that the quality, okay, and you don't have to worry about answering this question safely, because I want to know the truth. Do you think that the quality, come on, you know how I am. I mean, we're old men now. What do we got to lose, But the truth of the matter is the quality of boxing management today. Now I do believe that there are a handful of good promoters. I mean, obviously, I think the model, at least in all of our lifetimes, was your father, Don King. And I think a lot of people still try to emulate his success. But from a management point of view, do you think there's a lack of quality managers out there? I mean, you're just...
Oh, no, without a doubt. Listen, that's been an ongoing complaint of mine for many years. See, there's really no criteria, no prerequisite for a guy to become a manager in this sport. There's no litmus test that you take for your knowledge of A, business, B, the sport. There's none of that going on. What it is you fill out an application and you pay $50, $100, whatever it might be, and as long as you're not on drugs, or you're not a convicted felon or any of that stuff, and you can pass the bullshit background check, you're a manager. Yeah. And if you got to sign a fighter, well, so be it. So you have a lot of managers that were, just hangers on, people hanging around the gym, former fighters, trainers, there's not, you would think that management would fall, you would require some sort of business acumen in order to to be able to guide and suggest, consult, advise an athlete on a career path. And what happens to that fighter's, when you start to negotiate, you have to have some negotiating skills. And what we have now, you don't. There's no requirement for any of those things to become a manager. So, yeah, anybody that's haven't been in trouble and that can pass, like I said, a small background check can become a manager, and then it's a matter of them convincing their neighborhood friend who might be turning pro, and that's what or as a boxer might be what inspired this guy to want to be a manager because he's a friend of the fighter. Well, I want you to manage me, and keep it tight because there are trust issues in boxing. And I got a lot about that. We can go into it anytime because of the lack of education that a lot of these guys have due to, remember back in the 70s, Billy, or 70s, 80s, you turn on the Wide World of Sports and you get USA versus Cuba, USA versus Russia. And these kids, if you're really talented, you may start boxing at the age of 10, 11 years old. And if you're really, really good, man, when you're in your formative educational years, like in high school, you're taken out of the classroom, you're traveling the world, you're flying to Poland, you're fighting the Polish team, you're fighting the Russian team, and so forth and so on. But that's quality time outside of a classroom. And by the time a young kid like that turns 18, which is the average age that most of us will graduate from high school, this kid is turning pro. And if he's really, really good, by the time he turns 22, which you and I may be graduating from undergrad school and college, he's a world champion. Now, at 22 years old, without a formative education, he's placed in a world in which now he can reap millions and millions of dollars from his talents and skills without a fundamental education on what to do with the money once you receive it. It's not so much about getting the money, it's what you're going to do with it once you get it, and to continue to get it and to save and put it away for a rainy day. When you have a short lifespan as a fighter, from maybe the age of 18 to let's say 35. Nowadays, this is extending into the 40s and so forth. And, now you got to cry for, a 58-year-old Mike Tyson and things of that nature. But that's not the norm. The norm is probably from 18 to 35, 36 years old. And that's pretty much it. And you have to amass your entire wealth for your future in that short time span, which is very difficult to do without knowing how to budget and being taught these things along the way, whether it's in a classroom or what have you, because we as humans, we have a propensity to consume. It's like 9-to-1. The multiple propensity to consume is like 90%, and the propensity to save is maybe 10%. So what happens is you get $1 million, you're going to spend 900,000. And you got these kids that's thinking ahead, well, I got to fight in June, so I can spend, I can buy this, I can buy that, I can get these diamonds, I can get this car, I can get all these things. And you're banking on winning, and then one day you might not win that fight. And you might have overstretched yourself. And now you're in a real conundrum, and you're trying to figure out how you can get back. And that's what makes guys stay in the ring, and sometimes a fight or too long. Yep. And we have problems in that area. So yeah, it's just a lot that goes into it. And without structured management, a quality management, someone that has, some educational background in the business world, to be able to sit and talk with these young men, to get them to understand that it's more to it than you just having a beef on the internet, or you thinking that you know more than anybody else when you actually don't. So it's that's a problem too.
Alex, I mean, Carl hits on a couple of points. First of all, every young kid thinks they know everything. I mean, we've all gone through it. And the other thing is that he pointed out, you know, basically the people hanging around, those cliques that they feel loyal to, you end up with what we've talked about for years now about rah-rah men, and are you getting real management? Are you getting real training? Are you getting advised the correct way, or are you listening to people that are saying things that you just want to hear? Is that something that, or let me rephrase it. How can you get a young person, a young fighter to understand that? Because the truth of the matter is, and this isn't just for boxing, for all sports, when you have that revenue coming in, and you buy that big house, you get those diamonds, you get that car, and then all of a sudden that career is over, or like Carl said, that big fight isn't there, or you didn't win the last one, so you don't get the opportunity, or if you're in football or baseball and you retire, that standard of living is never lowered, and that sucks out that money really, really quickly. I mean,
Right.
what do you think? I mean, with the fact that we don't have, and I loved Carl's point, Alex, about turning on the TV in the 70s and 80s, and he's 100% correct. You could watch. I mean, we were watching Muhammad Ali on Wide World of Sports. I'll never forget watching him fight Jimmy Young.
Right.
And it's an education where the fans get to see it. They're not waiting until 2 a.m. to see it. They're watching it. It's in the mainstream sports news. It's just, we don't have that anymore, Alex.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that, because we've talked about on this show, that one of the things that, was really a great thing back, and I think it was the 80s. Yeah, because it was James Scott. Because I remember when we did the Black.
Oh, I loved watching him.
One of the things that was being done back then was that even boxing was looked as a trade, and that not only was it that there was in prisons that there was the inmates were allowed to fight, but they were also trained in managing. They got to get real-time experience as trainers, cut men, all that kind of thing. But in our, tough on crime type of stuff and more for punishment rather than rehabilitation, we got rid of all those things. And if you think about it, those kind of things would help prepare a person for when they got out. They would have ability to do something that was productive in a sport. Now, granted, I think what Carl brings up, I mean, to me, I'm very fascinated about this because this is such an inherently dangerous sport. It's hard not to think of, how is this going to end? And it's going to end. It's very likely to end as for the athlete. I'm going to be in a diminished capacity because of these fights. Now, and I'm not going to mention his name, but there's a fighter that I've interviewed a bunch of times in this area, and I really like this person, and it gets to a point where I think now he is being managed by more like acquaintances because he's lost so many times and he's been stopped a few times, yet he has another fight coming up. He's been stopped like 3 times recently. And to me, I think my question would be to Carl is like, how do you get a guy to stop? What is it? I mean, how much could they possibly be making in these undercard fights that, they're to the point now where they're barely a name. They've lost so many times. So I think,
but it's ego too. And
I mean, it's got to feel good to go to the ring, to have an arena cheering for you. But at some point, is that really worth it? You keep losing.
No, because listen,
you're not making enough money. I mean, I just don't understand.
It becomes before that. And before you respond, Carl, I just want to say this. The truth of the matter is youth. Mark Twain said it best. Youth is too bad. Youth is wasted on the young, because as you're learning the trade of boxing, you're coming up, you learn different things now. and every athlete does it. Okay. They learn, they know all the tricks, they know what the guy's going to do, but now their body can't respond as quickly. That connection between, I know I need to move out of the way, or I know I need to go with that overhand right, and the extra split second it takes to deliver it, the youth is against you, and they're countering that attack. I mean, it's happened to me in management, and I'm not going to mention the person's name, but I say, I always say there comes a time when you're going to not like what I have to say, because I've always been honest about it's time to hang it up, and no fighter ever wants to hear that, right, Carl?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And listen, for me, throughout my entire career, having that particular talk always resulted in
a breakup.
It absolutely, but it never ended with the fighter taking that advice and somehow retiring. He goes on and gets, okay, well, we're done. You don't believe in me, or you don't believe, and then sometimes you have to draw the line. It's not worth it. The last thing that I would ever want to see is my fighter getting carried out on the stretcher with his life in danger, and God forbid he loses his life. And knock on wood, that's never happened with me. But the talks, it's like, hey man, it's that time. You need to now consider, going on to, your second act in life. And they don't want to hear that. So guys go out and as Alex put it so properly, is that they become diminished, mentally from taking these blows, man. We're not designed for that. And the older you get, you might be a half a second slower, to move an inch here, half an inch there, a second here, a second there. That could be the difference in winning and losing, and it can be the difference in you being healthy or being injured, and not just hurt. I mean injured, and the next thing you got a guy that's speech is slurred and things of that nature, and a lot of times they never bounce back from that. So yeah, you have to, there's a line that has to be drawn. But I will reiterate what I said earlier about, there's no litmus test, there's no qualification requirements to become a manager. So you may have a guy that's in there strictly motivated by money, not really giving a damn about the welfare, the health and welfare of the athlete. I mean, just put you in and you get my cut. And then you got guys that don't mind fighting. They're not going to ever be world champion, but if they can pick up $10,000-$15,000 every 2 months, something like that, fighting a tiger, they'll kind of accept that fate and take that risk, and it's never worth the risk, in my opinion.
Hey, Carl, to add to that, you don't have to know a left hook from a fish hook, and you can become the trainer.
Yes.
Of the same thing. Alex and I have talked about that exact topic on this show multiple times, where there should be something. Now, of course, there's going to be people that are going to disagree, because they're going to be, why do I need to take a test? Why do I need to? Well, because if we're all concerned about the safety of the fighters, which we should be, and if we're all concerned about, real fighters, getting better and better, then that's all falls into place. And that's another result of that lack of knowledge that we face today, is when you see these guys facing the same. I'll use Deontay Wilder as an example. Deontay Wilder had a powerful punch, freaky punch, okay? But that's it. So, everybody that got involved with him, all of his buds, right, none of them really took the time to teach this kid anything else, nor did his management progressively increase his level of opposition. He fought the same level guys for several years. And then when he finally was up to that championship level, we all saw what happened to him. And then people say, oh, well, he was exposed. He was, well, is it all the fighter's fault? The
No.
team around him has to move them correctly, right?
You're right. You're so right about that, Billy. I mean, I could. Oh my goodness! Listen, Deontay Wilder. What ruined him more than anything was, of course, him coming up the ladder and fighting the same level of competition for like 30-something.
But they all do it now, though.
Right.
They all do it. It's not just him.
But then, listen. When Wilder got in the ring with Tyson Fury, fight number one, the anticipation was most people thought Wilder was going to win that fight. Okay, they fought to a draw. But understand this, and this was what I said then, and I'll repeat it now. Wilder's never been accustomed to punching up. The guy was taller than he is. He's never fought a guy taller than him. He's always punching down.
And
when he was fortunate enough to come out with it,
even Klitschko had that problem. And Manny Stewart helped him. If you look at those fights when he started fighting guys the same size, he struggled at first. Then he learned the difference. And Tyson Fury, you mentioned Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury never had a punch. His jab used to come up from below. He never fought guys. All those guys had to learn how to fight guys the same size. I mean, let's face it, it wasn't common to see a 6'6", 6'7" guy. Now it is.
And see, you also have to take an effect. It's like one thing I used to do with my guys. Every time we go into camp, I would bring a southpaw, whether we're fighting a southpaw or not. Because you never want your fighter to fight a southpaw, and the first time he's ever exposed to getting in the ring with a southpaw is perhaps training to fight one. I'd bring him in no matter who we fight, and every other day or so in training camp, whether it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it might be, you're going to do some rounds with a southpaw. And this is when you have one professional fight, 5 professional fights. Not when you just get to the top. So by the time you are at the top, when you get in the ring with a southpaw, it's nothing new to you, and your muscle memory may kick in, and you can make those necessary adjustments. The same thing occurs if you look at the top 10 and everybody in that top 10 is taller than you. You need to learn how to fight taller guys. So you bring that particular guy in the camp. And if you're the tallest guy and you've never fought a guy your same size, you try to find a guy that's that size and you keep him so that you can learn to punch on, straight and get prepared for what the competition is presenting at that particular time. But southpaws, you see a guy never fought a southpaw, never been in the ring with a southpaw, and now all of a sudden he's fighting not only a southpaw, but he might be the best southpaw in the world. He's the world champion. So what do you do then? The guy just, that all falls under management. That's my point. And the management should tell the trainers, what to do. And a good trainer would know that. So, those 2 categories, Billy, that don't require any kind of prerequisite to get a license is probably the 2 most important and crucial parts of a fighter's life. And he's putting it in the hands of sometimes, and unfortunately this may be the case, that they're putting their future and their lives in the hands of some very unqualified people.
There's no doubt. And Alex, how do you back that up with social media? Here's social media is driving this bus, driving a fight, and they don't have the right people around them to advise them correctly. And they all have $ glasses on. They're saying, well, yeah, maybe we can all make some money. Go ahead, get in there, or I always used to love, I never fought a southpaw, so we brought in with southpaw. Okay, now I know how to fight southpaw. What are you talking about? Like Carl just said, right, Alex? You got tall southpaws, short southpaws, southpaws that, are power punches, southpaws that are jabs. You should be fighting 20 southpaws before you say you know how to fight a southpaw, right?
Right. And I think that's, I mean, if there's, I think there's probably, anyone could probably list a whole bunch of things of how the whole Jake Paul, Logan Paul phenomenon is bad for the sport. But I think probably the number one way it's bad for the sport, and I guess it shouldn't be surprising because this is sort of our time, is that the way they do business is as if the business of boxing, the hurt business, is easy, that all you need is an audience and you can make big fights.
But they're making it work.
And they are, but they aren't. I mean, as you can see, the Canelo fight's not going to happen. And it shouldn't, because, I mean, this is a very dangerous sport. And I would hope nobody really sanctions that, because that's a good way to get somebody killed. Is to put somebody grotesquely inexperienced in against one of the best fighters on earth. And I think that's where the business side of the sport, as mean and cutthroat as it might be, it's keeping somebody like a Jake Paul alive, because his big mouth and his social media following, if it was up to him, he'd have that fight.
I'm hearing they're going to fight each other now.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
What, Logan and Jake Paul?
Yeah, that was the latest thing.
Yeah, see, I mean, and then there's an aspect of it that's kind of fake. Although I know from experience that there was nothing fake about my brother and myself fighting. We used to fight in our basement.
Yeah, but how much money did you make in your basement?
Nothing. It was just for bragging rights.
No, I know. Well, listen, fellas, we're already out of time, but we got to continue this discussion. So I'll get with you again, Carl, and
sure,
we'll get back and do a part 2, because there's a lot. We didn't even touch on some of the stuff that I would have liked to talk about, because it's the saddest part is a lot of, well, they may not listen to our show, but a lot of the younger fans don't even understand what you're saying, and they don't look at it that way, and they think that if it is sold on social media, like Alex said earlier, then it must be good, or if the guy's got an O, he must be good. It doesn't matter who he fought, and I've said many times, young fans, I wish they would learn a little about the history of the sport, because I think it puts it in perspective, and it's really the only sport. I mean, football, baseball, hockey, basketball, it's all evolved, right? It's all evolved. But boxing, I think it's so important, because potentially we could have had the best fighters ever today because of the advancements, but the mental part and the heart just isn't there. And I think the people behind the scenes aren't there either, and it's like you said, Carl, and I agree, all you need is a check. All you need is some money, and poof, you're a head trainer, you're a manager, you're a promoter,
throw a towel over your shoulder.
Yeah. You hold a bottle of water. I'm the second, so anyway. Well, listen,
I mean, that's the thing, is that this is the sport where there's really no quick way to the top of the sport. And I think that's sort of the illusion that Jake Paul gives, is that you can be an outsider, and then within a couple of years and maybe just a handful of fights against names or barely names, has-beens, old men, you can be at the top of the sport, and that's ridiculous. I mean, that's just
it is, and it's
one real fighter, and he lost.
It's unfair. It's unfair to all the guys that have been amateurs, that have been toiling in gyms,
absolutely,
at the bottom of a fight card, and deserve more. And
I can't agree more. And I've said it. It's not fair to those fighters, and quite honestly, the sanctioning bodies and the way it works, again, Carl, the business end, the way it works today is a slap in the face for those young fighters busting their behinds in the gym and listening to their real trainer, if there are any more out there, and then what if you're a young fighter, why would you keep doing it? if you're not going to get the opportunity because of Jake Paul, and no, and listen, I give Jake Paul credit because he's a great salesman and he does come in shape. He just doesn't have the talent because he hasn't been doing it long enough, and it is what it is. But listen, guys, I appreciate the time. We're going to do this again, and
do that.
We'll definitely get Carl involved, of course. And I can say this to everybody: hey, make sure you tune in next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, I'll leave you with this. Ciao, baby.
All right.